Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how I took this photograph using one speed light, a MagMod Grid, a MagSphere and my old friend the Pixelstick. So let's crack on. Okay, so the good news is if this video even exists, hopefully it must mean that the photograph works to some degree, because at the moment I've not got confidence it is going to, but we'll try our best. This photograph is basically light painting, and light painting basically means that you have a very long exposure, a very long shutter speed, and within that time you put a bright light across the scene and that burns itself onto the center and can create really cool effects. It does, however, mean it's quite tricky to achieve. So the first step is to have your camera on a tripod. The reason for this is because we are going to be using a long exposure, probably of around 10 or 15 seconds. So you want your camera to be fixed, otherwise you're going to get a lot of blur in your shots. Now, bearing in mind at the moment the lights are on in this room, but when we actually take the photograph properly, I'll have to turn the lights off. Because if I was to take a 15-second exposure in these conditions, these lights at the top will be way too bright and blow out all the highlights in the shot. So the first step, as I say, camera on a tripod, 15-second exposure. I will then put my ISO relatively low. So this is going to be a test exposure at the moment. So I'm going to put my ISO on 100. We will put our exposure at 10 seconds. So we'll see what that gives us at, say, f9. And what I'm going to do now is just turn off the main lights and just take a shot of this scene with those settings to see what we get. What I'm hoping for is more or less a black scene basically, or at least a very underexposed scene, because this is quite a cool venue and I like the leading line, so I'm quite happy if we get some of the ambient light in, but I don't want to have very much ambient. So let's just turn these lights off and then I will see what happens with the settings. Okay, so there's our base exposure. As I suspected, it's more or less completely black, but that's fine. It's not really a problem to not get any of the ambient light in because there's so little ambient light, it doesn't really matter. So the next step is going to bring in our model Demi. So Demi, if I can move you in, please, thank you. I'm going to ask you just to stand about here, please. The speed light I'm going to put over here, but I'm going to have you, so if you can be about there, Demi, if that's right, just facing this way. Now, obviously, at the settings that we're using at the moment, if I was just to take a shot without any additional lighting, i.e. with no speed light, then Demi's just going to be in complete darkness. So what I'm going to do is use a speed light to light Demi up. So I'm going to use my Godox V860 speed light and I'm going to attach onto the speed light two modifiers, a MagMod Grid. That's going to stop the spill of the light. It's going to concentrate the light, so we just more or less from waist up on Demi, and I'm also going to use a MagSphere as well. That's going to soften the light, which is going to make the light just that little bit less harsher, which I find is really good for portraits. And I'm going to position this. You want to move the speed light so that it's above Demi. Light looks a bit more flattering when it's coming in from above. Positioned around 45 degrees to where Demi is stood. So let's put that there, and this is speed light A, and I'm going to guess at my speed light's power, bearing in mind that the room that we're in is going to be extremely dark, so the flash doesn't have to work very hard. So I'm going to guess at maybe a 16th. That could be too strong, but we'll see what happens. This is my Godox X Pro trigger. So speed light A is on a 16th, and I'm going to turn the lights off in here again just to see what this exposure gives me. Now the important thing to note as well is at the moment the camera is on front curtain sync. That means that the speed light is going to trigger at the beginning of the exposure rather than the end. Perfect. So Demi, if I can just move you one step, that's it, perfect? Yeah. So Demi is good now. I'm going to just move your body that way a little bit, Demi, if that's right. That's it, a little bit more, facing that way. That's it, perfect. So this is just a test, so don't worry too much about this, Demi. So again, our settings now, 10-second exposure at f8 at ISO 100. So let's see what that gives us. Going to turn these lights off. So the room is more or less pitch black. You can see me because I'm being lit by this light here. And So again, we've got to wait the full 10 seconds to see what this looks like. But this should work fairly well, I would hope. Yeah, that looks okay. Even though it's a 10-second exposure, Demi is perfectly sharp. That's because the speed light has frozen her. If anything, I could probably touch the speed light up a little bit higher. Now, bear in mind we're F8, so that's going to make the perceived flash power that little bit weaker. So I'm going to go from a 16th power with the speed light to an 8th power. I'm actually going to open up my aperture from f8, I think just to f5.6, again, just to give the speed light that little bit more power. And let's just see what happens this time. And I think, all being well, I think this will be a good base exposure. Then comes the really tricky part. Yeah, so we've got now a good base exposure from which to work from. So I'm now going to put the camera on the timer mode, and it's going to give us 10 seconds before the shutter opens. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and go. Yes! Demi nailed it. So, Demi was perfect then, it worked really well. The one slight thing we're going to have to be, well, it's impossible for Demi to do anything else, is that as Demi moves, the rest of the exposures, because we've got a little bit of ambient coming in, then we're seeing like the imprint of Demi after the speed light's gone off as well. So to counteract that, I'm now going to go from f5.6 to f8 again, and I'm going to increase my speed light power from 8 to 1/4. And I'm just going to do one more test, and then hopefully I can introduce the Pixelstick, and if we're good, we'll get it in one go. Again, let's try and count down. So I'm going to press the shutter now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so settings wise now, I think we're more or less there. So all it's going to take now is a little bit of patience. So I'm going to turn the lights on and just explain to you now what I'm going to do next. So we've now turned the lights on, and I'm now going to introduce a Pixelstick. I'm going to talk you through this with the lights on. So this isn't going to count as an actual photograph, because I say we can't take this photograph with the lights on in here. But when I press this, as I move across here, these red lights basically burn into the photograph, because the shutter is open for 10 seconds. So what that means is I can move this around, I can swirl it around and things like that, and it will give us different effects. So what I'm going to try and do is to press the shutter. I'm going to come around here. Once the speed light's gone off, I'm going to come over behind Demi, turn this on, and then basically spin this round like a big circle behind Demi. And all being well, if I then I should have about 5 seconds to do that in after the speed light has triggered. It should give us something quite decent. We'll see. Okay, so I'm really pleased with what we've got so far. I changed my idea a little bit. As you'll see, the first few shots, I just had the circle, but I just didn't really like it. I just didn't think it was very effective. So what I then did was, I'll just show you. I'll turn the Pixelstick on. So again, I pressed the shutter. We then had a countdown. Once the speed light had gone off, I then walked behind Demi and basically came in like this, twiddled round behind Demi, and then slowly walked away. And then the 10-second exposure was up about at this point. I thought that was much better. Now, the other thing which I felt didn't really work as well as I would have liked is that when Demi, who did it perfectly, when she swooshed, there was just a bit too much movement and her arm just looked a little bit distracting. So instead what we did is we just asked Demi just to like hug the veil around her like this, and I felt that was much more effective. Now that I've got the settings right, what I'm now going to do is just play around with another one of the settings on the Pixelstick. So I've used the red now, which I really like, so whatever happens now, I'm fairly pleased with what we've got. But I'm now going to try another one, because we've got a rainbow effect on here, just see what that looks like. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll see how we get on.
Just to let you know, the Patreon version of this video contains bonus content where I show you exactly how I edited one of my favourite photographs from this shoot in Lightroom. Join the Patreon, has loads of other benefits as well. So if you enjoy my content, would like to improve your photography and grow your wedding photography business, then check out the link in the description and come and join us over in the Patreon community.
So just tried the rainbow one, and I actually really like that as well. So I'm not sure what my favourite is, either the red or the rainbow. Please let me know in the comments what you think. But yeah, this is probably not a photograph I would ever attempt at a wedding, because you see it's quite tricky to do. It's more just for fun really. But it's an effect that is quite effective, so I'm really pleased that I tried it. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.